Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're talking about today a film that I've wanted to see for ages, Playtime.
Yes.
Directed by Jacques Tati.
Yes, I thought I had seen it, but actually I was confusing it with Monsieur Hulot's Holiday.
Well, Monsieur Hulot appears in this.
Well, Jacques Tati is Monsieur Hulot.
Exactly. So you realised like an hour in, or maybe half an hour in, that you hadn't actually seen this before.
That's right.
And at that point, you went, well, I'm not really enjoying this. And then you started to laugh at stuff.
Yes.
And it is a comedy.
It is a comedy, though, you know, I still have kind of mixed feelings about it, really. I mean, I think it's a film that does make a lot of demands on the viewer, you know, and
This is one of the reasons I've never watched it before, because I always knew I would need the occasion to sit down and not pause it, not do anything. I would have hoped it would have come to a cinema. Yes. You know, then it would have been, all the control would have been taken away from me. I knew that I would never be able to watch it, but I was doing something else.
No.
Because I knew it's visually demanding, it's visually rich, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad I saw it with you, because I think I would have turned it off after the first 15 or 20 minutes.
Right. Do you think it improves after that and you would have missed out?
I think it does improve. I think it's really interesting. I didn't find it fun, even though I laughed a lot and it was entertaining. You know, I think the absence of a plot, really, and the absence of characterization and the leisurely pace, you know, it was not... I mean, it was not a difficult watch, but it was not an easy watch either. Yeah, the things that draw you into a film, which are those things, which are characterization and story, you know, they're very loose here. Yeah.
So you thought you'd seen it before and then realised you probably haven't. Or if you have, it's a long forgotten memory.
That's right.
So what did you think you knew about it before going in?
Well, I think I was confusing it with Monsieur Hulot's Holiday, which I just remember having seen as a child or as a teenager, and just having really loved it. I haven't seen it since, you know, but I really loved it. And I thought that's what we were going to see.
So this was just a completely new experience.
Yeah, exactly. Right. You know, but, I mean, you know how it is with memories. I mean, for the first 15 minutes I thought, did I get it wrong? Are they... You know, does it start at the airport and then does it move to the beach? Or, you know, it's that kind of loose memory.
Well, what I knew about it was the kind of stories around it. So famously, there was this enormous set built for the film, which included the paved roads outside, that sort of thing. So it's in this kind of sort of dystopian, like future financial district / city centre in Paris. It's very impersonal, very detached. You know, you see the Eiffel Tower like twice. Once is at a great distance, and the other is as a reflection in a window of these great glass buildings. Like that kind of that rich, you know, original Paris is a long way away from where the film is set. And I knew that this set cost an enormous amount of money, something like 17 million francs. Right. Which was something like $3.5 million at the time in 67. Well, 64 to 67. It took 3 years to film. There were financial problems. It ended up bankrupting Jacques Tati, basically ruining him, and it was a financial failure. I don't know how it did critically, but financially, very, very badly. And I knew that it was about these long takes that were very wide. It was shot on 70mm, so that the details would show up. You could see someone in the corner of the screen, someone in that corner of the screen, all this action happening at the same time, little jokes happening in different parts of the frame, that sort of thing. So I was really looking forward to seeing all of that, and I think it works beautifully. What I didn't expect was the way that life kind of comes into the film through the course of it. So it starts off... I'd heard it somewhere. I don't know if it was something that Tati said or something that a critic has said, that the film is about straight lines turning into curves.
Ah, that's a very interesting way of putting it.
So people kind of walk in straight lines, turn at sharp angles. Obviously the buildings, that sort of thing, are regimented. They're in these rows and they're all identical. And as the film goes on, particularly during the course of the restaurant scene, which is probably the major part of the film, life kind of starts to emerge. People start dancing, people start getting drunk, chaos starts to emerge, colour comes into the film. You know, for a long time it's it's greys and it's dark blues and dark greens, and that's about as much colour as you get. And then people start wearing kind of bolder dresses and that sort of thing. And by the end, you get this carousel sort of merry-go-round thing out of that emerges out of a roundabout that's got gridlock traffic that's moving very slowly. The music really cues you in to get the joke that it's kind of carnival music. There's kind of old people there with young kids and balloons, like grandparents, grandchildren, all this kind of stuff. Someone selling ice cream. Actually, I got quite moved at the end that all this life had kind of come into the film, and it was so joyous.
You see, I didn't like it.
Really?
Yeah, because I thought, the film is anti-modernity, right? So it begins with, in an airport, and like you said, then you go into a convention, everything is straight lines and grey and rigid, and nothing modern works. The chairs are all like, they make kind of semi-farting sounds and, and so on, right? And at the very end of the film, and it's all full of foreigners, right? It's all tourists and Germans.
Lots of American tourists,
Lots of Americans. And at the end of the film, when you say, it turns a curve, which is true. I mean, I agree with everything you said. But the reason why I don't like it is because, towards the end of the film, what you get is the old France back into the picture. The workmen with their wine and the flirting and the making passes of the women and the stealing of the drinks and the working people, and the French chanson, and the cheeses and the and then actually, so at the beginning the reflection is the Eiffel Tower. Towards the end, it's like the Sacré-Cœur. So I thought it was like a kind of a nostalgic thing. So life erupts really kind of when you get to the true France, the old France.
That's interesting.
And I didn't like that.
Do you think that, because I know what you mean, and I think if it were maybe like kind of relationship with the nationalism that maybe evokes is something that I miss, and I say I miss, I mean I don't get, because I'm not French. Whereas if it were British or English especially, I would feel that kind of reservation towards, because when kind of English nationalism shows up, I'm pretty reticent about it.
I don't think it's so much nationalism. I'm not sure I would put it that way.
Okay.
But it's a nostalgia for the past.
Yeah. Okay.
It's like the workers from the market, and the men fixing the roads with the cement and the holes.
Manholes.
I think manholes. That's right. That's what you see towards the end, right? All those working people in traditional jobs kind of coming out. So I'm not sure it's purely like a nationalism. It's more like a nostalgia for the past, and tradition, and I mean, actually, all those workers at the end were like the equivalent of like, I don't know, London Cockneys coming from Covent Garden, to have a pint at the new whatever, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it evoked for me. So it wasn't like a rah-rah nationalism. It was just, a nostalgia for the past, or, that kind of life is in tradition, and, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but the soullessness of the beginning, which begins in an airport, moves to a convention center, and then the life at the end, which really starts in a nightclub, where nothing modern works, actually, and what keeps everything alive is traditional stuff that is handmade or that requires people.
The music especially.
The music, the singing, everything mechanical or electronic is a failure. Everything about design is a failure, So, and then kind of to move into, again, that American drugstore cafe where all the food is soulless and everything is terrible until the workmen arrive.
Yeah. No, what you mean. So at the end, in the carousel scene, let's call it.
Yeah.
That is this kind of life being brought out of modern things, modern imagery, kind of modern cars, modern traffic jams. Kind of the crane turns into like a sort of, like a ride basically.
Yeah.
So it evokes that. So do you think is that supposed to be, or do you read that as a kind of synergy between the nostalgic and the modern, or the nostalgic kind of breaking through and overtaking it, like Life Finds a Way.
I don't know. I mean, I haven't thought of it the way that you that you put it, because I was just skipping that part, I suppose, right? Because you see the people inside, and then actually that very stylized traffic, going around and around. I just thought, well, that's a tiny thing whilst the tourists are all going on the way to the airport. But now that you mention it, it does have the only aspects of modernity that seem fun, right? So the new cars, the Citroens, the motorcycles, kind of, with couples in them, the vans with, sexy roller skaters in the front. So it might be a moment of synthesis. Yeah, it's kind of, but it's clearly the culmination of the film. It's almost just before the end point where everything goes through the airport in darkness. I also kind of couldn't quite figure that out, because I thought initially, how neat, it's 24 hours.
The day.
And then as the bus goes to the airport, it's dark. And you think, well, actually, then that destroys my thesis that it's a day, right? It's a 24-hour period, because all of a sudden now it's a day and a half, presumably.
Yeah, we've been through the night at the restaurant.
Yeah. So I didn't quite... And then the film gets progressively darker, doesn't it, as it gets near the airport. So
I think it kind of cuts to a nighttime shot. That's the impression, like maybe from like an evening shot to a nighttime shot. You seem to cut quite quickly, and then it all just fades to black, and that's the end of the film.
So I didn't quite get that, right? I mean, I think I was expecting, by the first half hour of the film, I was expecting so little that there were lots of things that made me laugh subsequently. They were unexpected. Yeah. Or a joke catches you by surprise. And actually there are many clever jokes, and there are many jokes that are cleverly filmed visually.
Yes, this is what I wanted to bring up. There's a lot. There are kind of these visual puns that occur. Some of which I think have probably been seen before and seen since. Not everything is necessarily original, but there's a kind of cacophony of them. There's one in the drugstore where the electronic sign says drugstore and the letters are lit up individually, and then it breaks, and the guy's saying, no, light that one, no, move it over, and eventually the O lights up in drugstore, and that's above a priest's head, makes it look like a halo, and there's nothing else to it. It's just a lovely little joke. I think there's one where like a guy's locking a door at the bottom, and the handles make it look like horns on his head, something like that. There's a really nice one, which again is really evocative of the kind of thing I've seen a few times, where in the long scene where Monsieur Hulot goes to his friend's, meets an old friend and goes around to his apartment, and they're watching TV, and the TV's kind of built into the wall, and then you see the other character who you see quite a lot, the girl. She's in the next apartment, and you're watching from outside. There's kind of, it's part of the image of modernity in the film that there's transparency to everything. These are supposed to be private places, but they're right on a very busy street, and they have curtains, but they're not using them, and you can see right in and see everything, and you're entirely outside looking in as a voyeur. And the TVs seem to be back to back on this connecting wall, and then the shot is held from side on, so it hides the TVs, and you just see the people on the left and the people on the right, essentially watching each other through the TV. That's the visual kind of joke, and and so what happens on the right is responded to on the left, like someone comes in with a broken nose, and everyone on the left goes ooh, the bits. I think one of the guys starts to undress on the left, and on the right they tell the daughter to go to her room because it's not for her. I think there's some really beautifully precise and interesting visual design. There's one joke that I loved, one of the first ones that I really laughed at, where in the kind of office building Monsieur Hulot visits at the start, you get to this floor where it's shot from sort of waist height, so you see these this grid of filing cabinets, what appears to be, and then a little later you see the shot from a floor above, and you realise that these filing cabinets are actually cubicles that people work in, which is interesting, and also I think probably anticipates like the cubicle office by quite a few years. I think that's kind of an era to come, really. And when you're looking at this top-down shot, there's this lovely bit where someone's on a phone call to someone in a cubicle, like 3 cubicles away, and you can see them both on the phone. And one of them says, "Can you get me the figures for such and such?" And so the other guy puts down the phone, runs to the cubicle that the guy is in, and on the outside, it is a filing cabinet, so he takes out some document, runs back to his own cubicle, then gets on the phone and says, "Yeah, the figures are blah, blah, blah." And it's like, he could have just done that. It was on his cubicle.
Yes.
I love that sort of comic, cartoony, manic thing. And the film has a lot of that going on. There's some very beautiful joke design.
Yeah, the cartoony aspect, for sure. But you never thought that there was anything at stake for the character. Like, nobody was ever really in any danger.
Oh, no, that's true.
Or, you know what struck me most, actually? That until the end, where, you know, a worker makes a pass and the girl says, no, you know, that there is not even a suggestion of sex anywhere in the film.
No. But I think that kind of goes along with the films up until they start dancing. And dancing is kind of inherently sexual to some degree.
I didn't even find that.
But I agree, kind of, even then, probably not. But certainly up until then, when things are really meant to be, I think, you know, at their most impersonal and kind of disaffected or what have you, then there's no real sense of connection of any sort, including sex.
Yeah, I know. I just thought it was weird. Like, I mean, not necessarily in a bad way.
Right.
I just thought it's... I can't think of another film where, you know, there's not even a suggestion of sex, you know, for most of it. Yeah, that's kind of...
Yeah.
Can you?
I mean probably children's films.
Okay,
I know what you're getting at.
You know, let's keep children's films out of it, though. Even there, I would, you know, we'd have to talk about specifics. But, you know, it's hard to think of a film not for children that has almost not even a soupçon of
it's chase.
sex. I just thought that was...
And not like conspicuously so. Like, it's not like sex kind of shows up and is shunned, it's just not there.
It's just not there.
Yeah. I know what you mean. That's interesting.
So, I did very much like the whole look of the film. I think it's amazing, right? Like, so actually I was very interested in your saying that it was shot in 70mm, because once you mention it, you can see it, right? Kind of, the image is big and it's clear, you know, but also the shot designs are so interesting. It's all on planes, and at angles and so on. It looks smashing, you know. I just thought that it was kind of sterile, really, you know, for the first part. And you think, okay, it's meant to be sterile, but actually that doesn't make watching it any more appealing. That kind of, you know, you could kind of give the impression of a sterile culture or environment and not make the viewing of it sterile, which I thought it was for the beginning.
I know what you mean, but I gave it a lot of time to breathe, I guess, because, well, my expectations of it were certainly different to yours, because I knew to a degree what I was getting in for. You thought you were seeing a completely different film.
I thought I was seeing a more charming, lighter comedy.
Yeah, exactly, which is not what this is.
Let's talk a little bit about the restaurant scene, because that is the centerpiece, right?
Yeah.
Of the film. I mean, it must last about an hour or something, right?
I think it's getting towards that. It's basically like the bulk of the second half of the film, and it's a 2-hour film. And
it's set in a gourmet restaurant that has just opened. It's, you know, the most modern of modern, and, you know, as the scenes unfold, you see that nothing works. That actually, you know, nobody's really looking after the customers. Some fish gets reheated like 55 times and resalted, and, you know, and so on. And the chairs are so badly designed that they leave marks on people. You know, the lights don't work, the heating doesn't work. You know, so all that's meant to be modern and wonderful about it, that you press a button and it does something, falls apart, which is, you know, I mean, Chaplin did that in modern times to a degree, except that this is all obviously much more modern and streamlined and so on. So I thought all of that had very good gags, actually. You know, and it was fun to watch, and the music, you know, kind of heated up, you know, the scenes, right? So it had samba music for half of it, and then American jazz music, and then it became French chanson. So that had a kind of like a different energy, and all of the characters or most of the characters that you'd met up to that point reappear in all of this, or they all converge. And it had a lot of really good jokes. I love the bit where, even the airplane is melting in the heat, and then, as the air conditioning goes up, it kind of straightens out. I just thought there weren't enough gags,
Well, I do kind of know what you mean. Like, at one point, in fact, that airplane bit with the little airplane model, that I thought, that's an airplane joke, as in from the film Airplane. Not that it's from it, but like there are bits that it really made me think of that kind of comic sensibility. And then I was thinking, could you say about this the way people say about Airplane? Could you think about the rate of jokes that it has? That's what people tend to think about when they think about Airplane. If you don't like a joke, another one comes along 5 seconds later.
It's not like that.
This is not like that. But I really think it's about the sensibility and the mood, which I really like. And in fact, when you said that you felt there was nothing at stake for the characters, I kind of think, well, it's not that it's not about the characters. You do recognise particularly these two, Monsieur Hulot and the girl, as they kind of inhabit the same scenes throughout the film, and eventually they kind of start interacting, and he buys her a gift at the end. So clearly it's kind of their experience of this, but it's that classic comedy thing of, you either have a weird guy in a normal world or a normal guy in a weird world. That's a lot of comedy setups can kind of be reduced to that to some degree. This is very much normal guy in a weird world. Monsieur Hulot.
Except that's the problem, because it's not a weird world. It's just a modern world.
But it's not, though. Like, it is comically dystopian, I think. It is exaggerated, and Monsieur Hulot is stumbling around, confused by, what's like right at the start. He's going in for what appears to be some kind of meeting in this office, and the elderly sort of guard / concierge says, "Okay, just sit there," and the shot shows Monsieur Hulot on the one side, and the other side is this very long hall, and down the hall you hear footsteps, and you see this guy. He's very, very small, and Monsieur Hulot's going, "Okay, I can get up, go and see him." He's like, "No, just sit there," and this guy's taking forever to walk towards the camera, and it's just this like absurdity that we know the guy's there. He's going to take forever to get here, and this weirdness is what Monsieur Hulot is sort of saying. Okay, but I can just go and see him. You don't have to take this much time. And the concierge is going, no, it's fine, just sit there. This is how we do things. He goes into the meeting room, and it's this kind of fish tank, with just glass walls where everyone can see in. And he's sitting on the chairs, and the chairs will make a different noise. And he's found himself somehow within this world or version of the world that he doesn't get. And there's stuff that we would find weird too. Like, the joke is he is the normal guy experiencing the weird stuff.
Well, maybe. I mean, I wouldn't have found it so weird. So for example, one of because it is modern cubicles, it is a modern airport, it is modern gift shops that you recognize. Yeah. So maybe there's that.
But there's a kind of detachment to the behaviour and that sort of thing that is, how can I say it better than detachment? Like, you don't respond to it. It's not human.
I don't know. I mean, so for example, there's the bit at the end where he has to go through the turnstile after buying the present.
Yeah.
And he mistakes one turnstile, which is just a whole bunch of pots with the same handle. And so he leaves that way, and he's made to return back, for no reason at all, to go through the proper turnstile. Right? And of course, there's people in front of the turnstile, and, he's running out of time and so on. To me, that's the equivalent of, like, computer says no jokes, right? Like,
yeah.
But
aren't those computer says no jokes about the absurdity of... Because the thing is, the computer says no joke in Little Britain is... It's not that the computer... It's the insistence of the woman who sits behind the computer that computer says no, and that's all, and you can't get through. And it's like, it's just, how do you communicate with this person? Why are you behaving like this?
Yes, it makes no sense.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but that is the film, right? It's the modern world that makes no sense to Monsieur Hulot, though actually I don't find it strange at all.
Well, I think maybe you've got... I do wonder to what degree this anticipates some tropes and imagery that maybe we're very used to today.
Yes. Yes, that's hard to say.
It is.
Maybe
I have to leave that one unanswered for the time being.
Yeah. I'm glad I saw it, and it was funny, If somebody were to say to me, this is the work by one of the greatest directors of all time, I would say, what? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be... Yeah.
It is, I think, considered his masterpiece.
Yes.
And he only made 6 feature films,
Yes.
I think, over quite a long career. I don't know if he had like kind of constant financial troubles or anything like that during his career, but this is certainly the film that seemed to finish him.
Yes. Well, I can understand why it finished him.
Yeah.
You know, I think I can't understand why it's considered, a masterpiece.
I think I can. I mean, there's a great deal of care in the design and the execution.
Oh,
of everything.
We can agree.
And the ambition, the scale of the sets and the imagery and that sort of thing.
Care and ambition, yes. You know.
But I think it has something to say. I think it says it quite eloquently. It says it with lots of good jokes, and it made me feel at the end, which I really didn't expect from a film that starts off so, dystopian and detached the way it does. I didn't expect that the culmination of the music and the imagery at the end to make me feel.
Well, I mean, his films are always gentle. I mean, one of the things that struck me was, that there's no joke at anybody's expense. Yeah, you could have made the Germans really nasty, and instead, they become the jovial, kind host of the party at the end, right? You could have made the Americans really a nasty butt of a lot of jokes, and he doesn't do that either.
No, to a degree he does. I mean, there is something interesting or something
very
fun.
Gentle joke.
Yes, it is. Oh yeah, I'm not saying it's like anti-American or whatever, but I do like that. There's a gentle, kind of running thing of how the Americans are constantly getting off buses and being kind of shooed around. Yes. And so I kind of like the idea, which really fits in with the kind of the loss of old France kind of thing. That these Americans have just arrived
and they're invading the restaurant. They say, "Oh,
no,
tourists." Uh-huh.
Oh, there is that. No, they've just arrived off the airplane at the start, and they get bussed into the city, and the first place they go is this trade expo with just products from like Philips and American companies, like rather than the Eiffel Tower.
I know, but you see, and all these jokes. So one of the jokes that I pointed out to you is that at the airport, or it might be a travel agency or something, they have posters from Mexico's, Stockholm, and actually they all feature the same modern building in the poster, right? Yeah. So kind of all these places are the same. Modernity's ruining everything. You can't tell Mexico from Stockholm,
Actually, that became an advert or an advert concept in Mad Men for Hilton, I think. I forget exactly what the thing was, but it was along the lines of Hilton's always there no matter where you are. We always see the same hotel in the image.
Yes.
So like that, in Mad Men, for that episode, it was turned to this positive.
Yes, it's a reassurance.
But of course, in this film, it's absolutely not that.
Yeah.
I really liked in the Trade Expo the German company with the silent doors. It was a slam your doors in golden silence.
Yeah.
Is the thing, and then you get, which I thought this is such a good joke. So you slam the door and they just mute the sound. They don't put a sound effect in. It's wonderful. So it's genuinely silent. So people leave in a huff, but can't. They don't make a noise. And then the CEO thinks that someone's been through his desk. He's told that someone's been through his desk. Thinks it's Monsieur Hulot. And so he starts having a go at him, shouting at him. And he says, "Look at this technology. It's state of the art." And he's holding like a binder in his hand, and he throws it to the ground. And that doesn't make a noise either. I really loved it.
Yes. I mean, it's a film that's hard to dislike, yeah? It is kind of very gentle. It's humorous. It looks smashing, I just didn't really take to it.
Can you think of films that you could compare it to? Or do you think it's,
Well, I suppose, a film that deals with what to me seems similar themes is something like Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, And if you think about that, I mean, that has like one glorious scene after another. Chaplin being stuck in the, in the mechanisms in the factory, or the assembly line, or roller skating in the department store. I mean, to me, this has nothing like that.
I don't think this has any individual moment like that, but I love the construction of these long scenes. It's like probably 5 or 6 overall scenes in the film, almost like vignettes. You move from one to the next, and the way that you kind of, some of them you move through, like the Trade Expo doesn't really develop. You move through it, and you kind of notice things happening. You have these little interactions with different booths. But then the restaurant scene is obviously you start off and you lead to somewhere else. That scene develops. The carousel scene develops. And I think it's beautifully orchestrated. And like right at the start, you really get the sense of the kind of, there's a plan behind everything. The timing of people moving in, things gradually getting busier.
It's very conscious of rhythms. It's very conscious of placement of people. Everything is really carefully worked through. One could make a joke and say, and yet it's lifeless, but that's not even true. It's not that. I think for me the main problem is it's a kind of experimental film in a way, right? But it's feature length. And so what happens is that you have a protagonist, but you don't have a hero or a character. Yeah, and you have a film, but actually you don't have a story. Yeah, so, yeah.
I do know what you mean about not having a story, but I know I didn't have a problem with that at all. I thought this is the situation. We're following these people through a situation. I didn't feel the lack of, a character's goals or wants or needs. I really enjoyed being like Monsieur Hulot in this world, discovering it, experiencing it.
Yes. Well, I didn't mind, and I gave myself to it, a quarter of the way through, but it did take me a while, and it might take me a while more to think, but actually right now, as a moment of reflection, I just think the film doesn't have a payoff. I think you're right in saying it's ambitious and so on, but I at least in terms of, the experience of watching it, which was fine, but not, overwhelming. And then actually the process of thinking about it afterwards, which is not giving me enough either, right? I mean, what I can get out of it is this thesis on modernity, and that's not enough for me,
Yeah. Maybe it's a film to live with a little bit.
Yeah.
Because in a sense, I have been living with the idea of it for a long time and just held off watching it.
Well, clearly I have had the wrong idea for a long time. Because, the first moment that it came in, it was almost like I was gleeful with anticipation, right? So you have that experimental music that begins the film. Yes. And I thought, oh, this is so daring. And then the colors come out, Playtime. I think, this is going to be so joyful, right? Because there's this yellow and blue and red, I think, right, that mark out the letters Playtime. I think, this is going to be such fun. And then you have gray, right? Exactly. So,
I'd be really keen to see some contemporary reviews of it, though. Just see kind of... Because I do wonder how much of it, as I say, is imagery and tropes that we are really used to now. How much of it actually was quite original at the time.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. I really don't know. I mean, my impression, and I don't know where I get it, is that it was badly received, yeah? And, that the reviews were mixed, but also it had some very negative reviews. And he had been somebody who, as you said at the beginning, had made very little films, but had made very, very successful films.
Yeah.
Right. So, this was not a success.
I'm looking at Wikipedia on his page. It has a kind of bit for each film. Trying to see if it has anything on the reception of Playtime. It says Playtime was a critical success. Francois Truffaut praised it as, quote, a film that comes from another planet where they make films differently. But that's the only sense you get of how it was received at the time. And then you get
there's a very good line, which still applies.
And then there's a bit about how, in many years later, other directors and other critics call it one of the greatest films of all time.
Right.
So, yeah. But the reason that I ask what films could you compare it to is because obviously there are many, many films that share its themes and ideas. But, there are very few that I could say, if you liked this, you'll like Playtime. I think it really does share a kinship with silent comedy. Yes. There's no question about that. I mean, the film is largely wordless, and almost all the comedy is visual.
Let me read you this from Roger Ebert, which is interesting. So, Jacques Tati's Playtime, like 2001 A Space Odyssey, or The Blair Witch Project, or Russian Ark, is one of a kind, complete in itself, a species already extinct at the moment of its birth. Even Monsieur Hulot, Tati's alter ego, seems to be wandering through it by accident. Instead of a plot, it has a cascade of incidents. Instead of central characters, it has a cast of hundreds. Instead of being a comedy, it is a wondrous act of observation. It occupies no genre and does not create a new one. It is a filmmaker showing us how his mind processes the world around him. It's an influence on the terminal, for which Steven Spielberg built a vast set of a full-scale airline terminal.
Yeah. Oh, right, yeah.
Playtime is Jonathan Rosenbaum's favourite film, and unlike many of its critics, he doesn't believe it's about urban angst or alienation. In a lovely passage he writes, "It directs us to look around at the world we live in, the one we keep building, then at each other, and to see how funny that relationship is, and how many brilliant possibilities we still have in a shopping mall world that perpetually suggests otherwise. To look and see that there are many possibilities, and that the play between them, activated by the dance of our gaze, can become a kind of comic ballet, one that we both observe and perform." That's kind of...
Isn't that nice?
Yeah, it's very beautifully put, actually. So, yeah.
There's a short film, which is the only thing that really springs to mind as something I've seen that's very similar to this. A short film by an Irish filmmaker and artist called David O'Reilly. It's called The External World, and it's on it's online. It's on YouTube, I think, and on Vimeo and whatever. It's 17 minutes long, and it's absolutely brilliant. It's an animation. I mean, we talked about this having a kind of cartoony, comic aspect. The jokes and kind of design of the world in The External World are much more overtly kind of comic-y and cartoony. But it shares this idea of like you see this enclosed space. You actually get these shots from the sky. It's all animated and computer generated, and you see these shots from the sky of the city, and only the bits of the city that you see, the centre, are coloured in. Everything outside is just white and blank. Like you really get the sense of just being in the middle of this place, and you just follow around a few different people, a few different characters, as they kind of explore the world. Some of them are living within the world and get it, and they're part of it. Some of them, like Monsieur Hulot, are looking at it kind of from the outside, going, "What's going on here?" And it culminates in this very beautiful piano recital scene where all of the characters that you've seen and enjoyed show up and they all kind of, as you said, congregate in this place, and just beautiful piano piece. But it's beautiful, so I really recommend that. This is like a 17-minute version, more colourful, of Playtime.
Yes,
really worth watching.
Yes, I think Playtime would have been better a little shorter.
I loved it though. I thought it was great.
Good.
I'm glad I waited so long to watch it in the right mood and setting. Yeah.
I'll have to think about it some more. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
definitely not my favourite film. So
I loved it, and I really recommend it. And there's not a lot you'll see that is very much like it, I don't think.
Yes, I recommend it. I think, it is a very interesting film. And I did enjoy it, actually. But...
Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Alright, well, thank you very much for listening. We're eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, YouTube, Google, Amazon, I think. Our social media is Facebook and Twitter, @eavesdropmovies. And our website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you very much.
Au revoir.
Au revoir. Oh, you're multilingual.